Well, hello everyone to today's webinar, and I have the great fortune today to talk to Bill and Jack Ottman, who are both co-founders of the social media site minds.com, and we will be touching on a variety of different topics regarding privacy, what is happening right now within social media companies, specifically on censorship, and many other topics. And their product that they have produced is fairly interesting, so you should all check it out. It's basically an alternative to normal social media. It really focuses on data privacy, and it cares about free speech. And it even offers to pay you for your opinions. So Wired recently in an article said, like, Minds is the anti-Facebook that pays you for your time. And that is, of course, of great interest to us, since Students for Liberty is active now in 100 countries, and we see censorship happening everywhere. I mean, yes, we have this happening in the United States. We see Twitter censoring, we see Facebook removing all kinds of different forms of speech. But much worse, we know, for instance, that countries in like the Democratic Republic of Congo shuts down the internet during election times because they don't want people to talk about anything. And there's even like worse abuses. And so Minds.com really focuses on alternative for people all around the world. And so with that being said, welcome, Bill and Jack. How are you doing today?
Great, thanks for having me.
Yeah, thanks for having us.
Absolutely. So for people who have not heard about Minds.com yet, tell us a little bit more about what the platform does and what would be the benefit for somebody joining now.
Yeah, so we're an open source social network where basically you earn for your contributions, and we have revenue sharing systems for contributors, and that's both in cryptocurrency and fiat currency. And so the app feels similar to mainstream social media apps, but everything is inverted, basically. So we have privacy protecting features and encryption. We don't have restrictive algorithms for suppressing your reach in the news feed. We have these revenue mechanisms I mentioned. Everything's fully transparent, and we have free speech policy for the content. So all of those components are pretty much the opposite of what exists on mainstream social media.
So what was your impetus to start this company right now? Because it seems like really like a uphill battle to go against Facebook with billions of users, TikTok with the same amount of users and so forth, and just growing. Tell us a little bit about the motivation behind this.
I think it always and still seems like an inevitability that something that is free and open is going to become a competitive alternative. So regardless of the fact that other proprietary surveillance options are, continuing to grow, I think that we see from patterns of technological growth in the past that free and open and encrypted options are growing at light speed. So I've always felt like I know that it's going to happen with some alternative, whether it's us or others or both, who are sort of existing within the same general ethos. But if you just look at Linux, Firefox, Wikipedia, Bitcoin, crypto in general, encryption protocols, I mean, these are all open standards that have risen to the top naturally.
Yeah, I mean, that's a good analogy, and I like that a lot, especially since I'm wearing a Bitcoin mining tie today for the audience. I got that as a present from my wife, so I'm a huge fan. And so that's interesting. And you already have right now, how many users do you have right now?
Jack, what's the count?
We've got a little over 3 million registered users right now. So we're growing pretty quickly, and yeah, I mean, every day more people are starting to wake up to some of the things that are going wrong on mainstream media. I mean, when we started the company back in 2011, no one was really talking about censorship and free speech on social media and algorithm manipulation. But now it's become, it's the front page of the the newspaper almost every day. There's Netflix documentaries being made about it. So I do think that there's a pretty good movement happening right now where people are waking up more to, the privacy concerns and the censorship concerns, and just some of the manipulation that can even, how powerful these companies have become with the ability to distribute information at the amount they do.
Yeah, I mean, we probably all agree that they're allowed to do that. It's their property, but it's great that you're informing the customers what that actually means, and that there's an alternative out there, because it seems like the more and more these companies are doing that, the more people are looking for an alternative, and your user base grows. So it's great that you presented people actually with an option. And I'm now also a user, so I'm excited to explore the platform a little bit more. But tell us a little bit more about, like, how do you make this sustainable? How do you actually make money as a company?
So yeah, we have a few different revenue streams. We've focused significantly this year on membership revenue. So if you go to minds.com/upgrades, you can upgrade to Minds Plus, which is like $5 a month. It gives you access to a whole library of exclusive content on the site, but it also gives you the ability to submit content to that exclusive library. And based on the performance of your content in that exclusive library, we give you a revenue share. So, the analogy is, imagine if you could submit content to Netflix, and if it performed well, Netflix would actually pay you out. So that's our first membership tier. I mean, the vast majority of functionality is free on the site and always will be, but we fully recognize that recurring membership revenue is the future. It's the most sustainable for any business. We also have Minds Pro, where you can get a custom domain, you get some enhanced video features, more of like a website, a customizable website type experience for your channel, and you also get everything included within Plus. And then we have the Minds token, which you can purchase, minds.com/token, and that's an Ethereum-based token, which is sort of the fuel of our advertising network, which is non-surveillance based. And you use the tokens to boost your posts. One token is worth 1,000 impressions. So yeah, we have a few different options, and it's growing.
Yes, it's growing, and I think you're also living really the truth that it's more important that 1,000 people love your stuff instead of like 1 million people like your stuff, because you also recently got like some social fundraising rounds where people pitched in and contributed to the platform as well. So congratulations on that. I think you raised over 1 million, probably more since then. But that shows that you have a committed community. But since you're focusing on free speech, but one problem of course exists, that a lot of people, quote unquote, abuse free speech, or they're using it in a way that is not intended because it doesn't contribute to civil discourse. So how do you prevent minds.com to become like another cesspool, like 4chan or like some other sites like that?
Jack, take it away.
Yeah, that's a great question. So, our opinion has really been on how important it is for robust content classification tools. And then therefore that enables like robust filtering tools for the end user, because, ultimately we don't want to be the ones sitting in our high chair telling people what's okay to say and what's not. I mean, we do have a policy that you can't be threatening violence, you can't be harassing people, you can't be posting illegal content or anything like that, and our admins will be searching the site for that and taking that down if it comes up. But in terms of anything that's legal speech is allowed to be on the site. So with that, we call it engineering free speech, because you really need to have a lot of filtering tools in place so that users can decide for themselves what type of content they want to see or what they don't want to see. So it's an ongoing challenge that we're always focusing on, but we basically built this, for now it's only really with NSFW content, which is like not safe for work. So some of the more unsavory content that you might not want to be seen in public or anything like that. So we have a system in place that can label certain posts in certain categories of that, and users can self-tag it as well. But what we also did is we implemented a user jury system, just because, what we've seen on Facebook and Twitter is, you'll see these companies just start smacking those, misinformation labels or, misleading labels on people's posts. And there's really no ability for them to even appeal it unless you have a large platform. So a lot of times, you'll see people with large platform get censored like that, and they'll kind of make a big deal out of it. And that's when the companies backpedal a little bit. But for the smaller users, there's no way to even appeal any of these decisions, and even if it's wrong. So we built a user jury system that manages appeals, so that if a piece of content is tagged incorrectly in their opinion, in a certain category, then they're able to actually appeal that tag to a jury of our community members, who are basically tasked with enforcing our terms and reviewing the decision we made, and they actually have the power to overturn us. So this was really important because it gives a checks and balance system on us as kind of like the admin team. And we did this in alignment with this paper called the Manila Principles, which I encourage anyone listening to take a look at. And one of their big points is that appeals on decisions should never really be reviewed by the same person who made that decision. So that was really the main reason that we wanted to bring in a jury system, to really help keep our team in check, and have a way for the community to sort of overturn some of the things we make if we overstep.
Oh, that's interesting. So you have like a decentralized jury system consisting of like different stakeholders that are not necessarily part of the company, that are reviewing some kind of these claims. So it's not only employees of yours doing this.
Yeah, it's like a decentralized governance type system, and we definitely want to extend it out further. The logic of kind of using consensus to make decisions, as opposed to, and that's how a lot of the decentralized systems like Bitcoin are working. And we want to eventually extend that out to making more important decisions on the site, even as far as what development we're about to work on with our roadmap and things like that, because all of our development is open source. But there is a risk of mob rule with that tactic. So until we're a little more comfortable that that's under control, we're keeping it only in reviewing the appeals. But we definitely want to eventually start extending that further into making more decisions on the site.
And let's stay on this topic a little bit. This is interesting, and we have some questions from the audience as well. Carl Sabo asked, does this just pertain to pornography or pornographic content? Is this left to user self-tagging, or is there like another way how people find those, or like how it's being blocked from the get-go? Maybe, I don't know if you're using any AI, artificial intelligence, to try to remove stuff like this initially. And then he also asked, what about hate speech? And specifically interesting, what about election disinformation, what we have right now? Would user be allowed right now on your platform to question the president-elect right now because of what's happening in what they are seeing as election fraud?
Yeah, I mean, people can question whatever they want, as long as it's not illegal or defamatory or anything that crosses that line. So basically, the NSFW system deals with pornography, not so much misinformation, because the problem with misinformation is that, I mean, the difference between like an honest mistake, someone who believes what they're saying, versus somebody who is like a disinformation agent, is very difficult to detect. I mean, even if in some of the analysis of the disinfo campaigns on Facebook, some of and the Russian group that wasn't even that big, but that did sort of infiltrate Facebook, they were boosting like funny memes. It wasn't even disinformation that they were boosting. They because the goal of the campaign is to create chaos and to delegitimize, making fun of the process as a whole, the election process as a whole, or making fun of Hillary Clinton or making fun of Donald Trump. Like, they found that that was effective for just creating civil unrest, generally speaking. And so literally the same meme that this group was advertising on Facebook is, the same memes that somebody in their basement would be posting because it's funny. Some of them were legitimately funny. Sam Harris interviewed one of the researchers on this topic. I recommend listening to it. But the other thing to mention about sort of the Wild West of free speech is that so we have a de-radicalization initiative called Change Minds, which Daryl Davis is co-spearheading with us as an advisor. And, a lot of the research we've compiled shows that censorship actually can cause violence. And there's actually more evidence of this than the fact than that the existence of the content on the network causes violence. There is evidence that, with the disinformation in like certain countries, like on Facebook has caused violence as well, because it, putting up disinfo about certain political groups, it can have seriously problematic effects. So we're not necessarily naive to think that, any content is just fair game, I think. But the tricky part is detecting the intent, and it's very contextual, and sort of every report needs to be reviewed on a case-by-case basis. And so with AI and ML, we're definitely starting to look into tools for helping us detect and classify content, but we would still want it to go through a human review, because it's pretty dumb AI at this point. It, like there was a case recently at YouTube where any comment critical of the Communist Party was just taken down right away. And then, they called it a bug. Maybe it was, I don't know, but either way, it doesn't really matter.
That's of course very problematic. Many different questions emerge here. It's interesting, but also encourage the audience to check out the gentleman you've mentioned. His name is Daryl Davis. He has befriended at this point, I think, over 200 Ku Klux Klan members, and he has embraced them, and he offered his friendship. And just by doing this and having a conversation with them out of respect, not of vilifying them, he has been able to get them away from the Ku Klux Klan and away from really wrong ideas about race and all these kinds of things. So it's a very inspiring story. So you should all check out Daryl Davis. But is that scalable? Right now you have like 3 million users. So after this interview, of course, you will have 5 million. So how are you going to deal with that, having so many more folks, and then having to maybe review every day, like, I don't know, 100,000 cases at some point? Like,
well, luckily they're
feasible?
liberty-minded people who are going to be generally more productive in the conversation, but we definitely try to be as cross spectrum and neutral as possible. I mean, that is the big question. Can Daryl's strategy scale in the digital realm? Because what he's doing is very interpersonal, face-to-face conversations. He does a lot through email and online already. Sometimes people will send him hate mail and he'll just respond like, "Hey man, how are you doing? Are you okay?" Like, they're calling him all these racist slurs and he's just totally unfazed by it. And, in fact, that is an incentive for him to engage. He sees that as an opportunity, as opposed to, a trigger where he thinks that they should be erased. But I think it can scale, and there are, with chat widgets, and if we can detect certain content with a classifier system, it's not just like, you do have to be careful about, feeling like propaganda-y. But I think that if we can pair people who want to chat with volunteers who are interested in these types of conversations, it's really just about pairing up people to communicate who want to communicate. So if there and there is a rising group of people who want to engage with racial extremists or different types of extremists, I think mental health workers are typically going to be more trained in this type of thing, but it's also not just for racist content that we would be building the system. It would also be for, people showing, suicidal tendencies, and because social media, it can cause depression, that's for sure. So at the end of the day, having someone to talk to is the most important thing. But, and hopefully not someone who's going to just drive you deeper into your own echo chamber. So if you sort of have these people who are like echo chamber breakers that are sort of on standby to go into a chat room with somebody, I mean, that's at least a pretty powerful hypothesis. And, over the next decade, we can see if it works.
Yeah. And just to add to that, I mean, whether it works or not is a great question, and something that, we're learning every day, and whether Daryl's technique can scale online. But at the end of the day, the reason we're more comfortable with it is because when you compare this strategy to what's currently happening on Facebook and Twitter, where they're simply just banning these more edgy opinions, they are acting like that's fixing something. But really all they're doing is sweeping this problem under the rug and sending these people to other places like Minds or other, networks where they might be able to have an account and say what they want to say. And, you can't really ban someone off the internet completely. So, when they say like, we don't tolerate hate, they're not actually doing anything to try to change hate or fix hate. They're just giving the problem to someone else down there. They're kicking the can down the road. So, with our opinion, yes, it's going to be a difficult task, and we're going to need a lot of people like Daryl to really step up and help change some of these people's minds eventually for it to actually make a difference. But at least in our method, there's a chance of a mind being changed. Whereas on Facebook and Twitter, and when you're just censoring all of this stuff, you're not actually doing anything to fix the core problem. You're sort of just pushing it to someone else's table.
Yeah, that's a powerful point. I liked it a lot. And do you currently have a functionality where you can pair up people? Because personally, I would be very interested, and I've done that when I was studying more for my PhD. I was talking to like a lot of socialists and communists. Like I would love to be paired up, say like if the communists say like, hey, ask a capitalist, and they can come to me and talk to me if they wanted to.
Yeah.
Because I know that they speak completely different language. They have different concepts. We might be using the same term. It's very different. And I would love to learn from them so that I can better talk to them about the ideas that I think will lead to human flourishing, which they fundamentally disagree with. Do you have a functionality on the site right now?
Not yet, but we're sort of in the product design phase, and we're writing the white paper on the product and project in general. But that's great to hear that you're interested in doing something like that. And I think a lot of people are interested. Hopefully it'll probably be out in some incarnation in like Q2 of next year. We are still working on the classifier system so that we can sort of detect where to target it. But yeah, I mean, I think the frame that you enter a network is really the key. And if people enter the network knowing like, hey, I'm going to go find people that I totally disagree with. Like I'm going to go find some racists to talk to because I want to understand why they think like that. Or I'm going to find some communists or some, ANCAPs or some whatever it is in terms of political philosophy or, ideology about race or immigration or any issue. Quite frankly, I mean, it's gotten to the point where everything is so polarized that, a standard Republican and Democrat, basically want to kill each other. And families are breaking apart, friendships are dying. And so I think that in some ways, radicalization has become mainstream. You do still have these polar extremes, like the very fringe, but a general inability to communicate and a general extremism has sort of entered more of a popular consciousness now.
Yeah.
And so I guess the final point with that is that I do think this chat widget pairing system will be able to be used just with Republicans and Democrats, not necessarily just, racial extremists and, the opposite. It could be relevant to anybody.
Yeah. And the other tricky part is obviously, it's a lot easier to say things when you're behind a computer screen and you're just commenting in a chat box versus if you're face to face with someone. And that's going to be one of our biggest challenges, is how we kind of encourage civil discourse and, not just have people coming and trolling these types of conversations. And, a couple of things we're thinking about right now that are pretty complex technically, but are really what we think ultimately needs to be in the base layer for this to happen, is like some level of decentralized reputation, so that you're able to detect users who are, they've earned a little bit of reputation from their peers. They're a little more trustworthy. They're not just some troll who just made an account and is coming to just be a bad actor. So that's kind of one very important layer that we're working on now. But another thing we've talked about is just like the art of talking online to each other. And I know Bill frequently talks about this, but the concept of steel manning, which is where in order to even engage someone, you have to first build up their argument as best you can, their argument. So you have to best articulate what you think their belief is before you can even really start engaging. And that really helps just like make sure that you're even on the same page about what the other person believes, because a lot of times that gets lost in translation and arguments. And, you could be arguing that someone believes something that's not even the case. And, getting that first big picture is, I think, a really important step to, really make sure that people are on the same page as to what the beliefs even are.
Yeah, that could be like a prereq in the chatbot where, before you even engage, you try to reach some sort of like consensus on steel manning each other's argument. But, it's not to say we haven't been working on this. Like we have done some more case by case reaching out to more intense users, like who have been on Minds for a couple of years, and try to understand like if their minds have changed at all since they've been on existing in this more free speech environment. And we have found certain users who are definitely way more open-minded and less inflammatory than when they first came on. So, we're just building up a few case studies right now by hand, and it is generally working. I think that the tone of the network has a big impact on how people behave on the network. So, when people are on Twitter and, they expect to be censored, or, they some people probably almost even try to get censored. I'm not saying we don't have that. I mean, in some ways people try to look for our line as well. And try to push our buttons. So, you're never going to get rid of the trolls completely. But, trolls do serve a purpose. They are a species, an internet species. And you do learn things from them. So, yeah. And then on the decentralized reputation thing that Jack mentioned, to be clearly distinguished from like a social credit score in China, it's not a centralized score. It's a sort of tree of trust with your network. And so not everybody has like one singular score. You have different scores depending on who is looking at you based on their network. And So it's it's a little bit more safe, and because it's interesting that you could be a bad actor who is on the surface seems like some upstanding citizen in your profile, but little do you know they're going around like spamming people's groups, and so it's the bad actors can exist on both sides, very much so.
I'm glad that you. Oh, so good.
Sorry, just one more quick thing, but just to add, so like when you said you'd want to come on and talk to a communist or something, what we eventually want is to be able to understand, with these scores where users kind of lie in terms of who they're interacting with, what type of content they're into, and all of this is privacy first as well, and based on pseudonyms, but that's sort of the back end data that's able to then power how you pair people together, who might, be good matches to sort of have this kind of civil discourse. So it's definitely a big challenge that we're working through right now, but something we've been banging our heads against the wall again for a few months now.
I mean, that's part of the business model, and that you have to figuring like these really hard problems out. And I really like how deliberate and careful you are about these things, because that makes a lot of sense that you have that approach. One thing that I would like to clarify, and you brought that up, Bill, regarding the citizen score. So people who don't know about this, they should definitely educate themselves about this, how this works in China. So they give every person in China now as a citizen score, and all kinds of different metrics go into that, and the government surveils all of that, which could mean, for instance, if you are purchasing, and they will be able to track that because they're also rolling out central bank digital currencies to make it like even more complicated, and they can track everything. But like if you hang out with the wrong crowd, or if you criticize the Chinese Communist Party, you will get deducted points, which could mean that at some point you're not allowed to buy a train ticket or a plane ticket anymore. They can take away like fundamental rights of you, like to just go to places because of this. And of course, that technology in itself is very problematic. However, it can also be used for good, as in the case that you've just described, Bill and Jack, where you're trying to just assess the reputation of someone, and people can opt out by just leaving mines. But once they opt out in, they have to play with the rules of the game. And if they behave in a way like very abrasively, or they share like pornographic content or something, it will go down, like their score will go down, and at some point they will be removed. And I think that's always important to think about, like how, and it's most likely you will do this on a blockchain, like to think about like the technology is neutral, but how it's being used is very fundamental, and to what scale. And you just have people have the option to engage in that, and that is of course very good. But if somebody has to comply to that, as in the case of China, that is very, very problematic. But you have also alluded to another point here, which is interesting. You made the claim that banning any kind of unsavory views that we don't like does not work. What's the evidence for that? Can you tell us a little bit more about the research that you have looked at in order to see that this claim is valid?
Yeah, I can pull up a couple of the studies. Let's see. So we've got, I'll just read a few headlines. There's a piece out of Nature. The quote says, "Our mathematical model predicts that policing within a single platform, such as Facebook, can make matters worse and will eventually generate global, quote, dark pools in which online hate will flourish." Out of the William Boyd School of Law, is the cure worse than the disease? Censorship of hate speech may well increase violence. At the University of Greenwich, Telecom Paris, quote, "Net censorship this is the title of the study, net censorship in times of political unrest results in more violent uprisings." So, I mean, there's dozens of these. And if you go to change.minds.com, there is a guide with a more bulked out list, but in the paper that we're going to be publishing, it'll be a very extensive catalog of a lot of the research that exists around this. But again, to play devil's advocate with ourselves, it's not so simple as, it never I mean, there's a certain line that you really can't cross. And unfortunately, like even the people who do call for violence in a sad way are the most important people to somehow get to and somehow communicate with, but just based on the law, that's not acceptable. And so, you know, because they're clearly the highest risk at highest risk individuals in society. And so it's like you have to invert the question and invert the solution, like as opposed to thinking of these individuals as the most important to ban and get rid of. You would actually, if you really cared about society at large, you would be saying that they're the most important not to ban, because they need to be communicated with in a way that could potentially evolve their ideology. It's not that easy though, and it takes a lot of time. And you know, there's just a sort of more pragmatic approach that you have to take. And so, again, it's very case by case. I think that in certain circumstances where a troll is just like destroying a group and, you know, posting spam and just, you know, in certain cases, like you got to block people. You have to. Otherwise, they will never-endingly try to destroy your conversation. You know, yeah, sure, maybe in like 20 years through civil discourse, you could maybe convince them, but you know, in certain cases, you have to. So I don't know if that answers your question.
Yeah, it does. And that leads to like another point that I think you made on the Joe Rogan podcast, where you, Bill, were interviewed. You made the statement that social media companies sometimes deliberately make people depressed. I'm not sure if it's deliberate or if it's just like part of their experiments to see how we react. People are getting fewer likes and they just want to see like how that changes behavior. Would you say that there is like a sense of that's deliberate and that they want to make people feel bad? Because normally one would think they want to just make us feel good all the time so that we come back to the platform.
Yeah, I mean, I think the study that I was referencing was the scandal at Princeton, where they deliberately engineered people's moods to be either happy or sad, and they proved that they could. So, I mean, just from that, you know, were they trying to make people sad? Yes, they were. I'm not saying that that is what they're trying to do. And you're right that, you know, addiction, people are, you know, it's hard to say because you can get addicted to sad things. You can get addicted to, you know, looking at all the bad comments on your post. So the addiction can sort of work both ways. It does work both ways.
Yeah, and also, you know, right now with the way social media is structured in a lot of ways is incentivizing getting as many likes as you can and getting as much attention as you can on your posts. And I think the side effect of that is that a lot of people, every time you go on social media, you have this like picture painted of the world, which is like everybody's best foot forward of them trying to show how great their life is or whatever it is they're up to. That's so awesome. And in almost every case, that's not really reality. You know, that person's not going to be sharing their problems in their life. So I think there's a lot of depression that's sort of like a result of that. And it's probably not intentional. I think what they want is people to feel good and get a lot of likes from the platform point of view. But that as a side effect can cause people to be like, wow, like my life's not nearly as great as all these other people's. So, in a lot of ways, like shifting the primary, incentive of social media from attention to other areas is another thing we're looking at, like, you know, shifting the focus. Like Bill said, when you come to the site, like, are you coming there because you want to get as many likes as you possibly can? Maybe for some people, or are you maybe coming there because you want to start engaging with people of different opinions? Or there's a lot of other kind of realms that you can try to put the focus on so that people are coming in with a different mindset of just trying to get tons of likes and, you know, show how cool they are.
Yeah, and there's benefits of both. I mean, we introduced our reward system where you earn tokens for your contributions, and then you can use your tokens to boost your posts for more views. In reaction to the restriction of algorithms on Facebook, where, you know, when you post on Facebook, only a few % of your followers are even seeing your posts. And, you know, that was a hugely unethical move by them. And because what our social media platform is about communication tools, and if you can't communicate with the people that you have connected with, then the whole thing sort of becomes a joke. So I do think that giving people access to exposure and certainly access to the people who have followed them is like a prereq. But again, it is sort of an attention focused feature, which I wouldn't judge as positive or negative. It can be abused. You know, could addiction happen? I mean, people like boosting their posts a lot, maybe too much. And so, you know, shifting the algorithms in the trending feeds, for instance, to something like what Jack was saying, where you're actually elevating the most balanced and nuanced conversations, you know, that's something that would be really interesting. There's a cool project that I've been looking at that Rogan talked to Tristan Harris about the other day, which was called poll.is, which is an open source tool for sort of, with AI, sort of detecting the tone and intent of conversations. And Tristan mentioned this idea of like an unlikely consensus system where you can feed people. It's similar to what we're talking about, pairing people with those who are different but yet relevant to them. So it's not just pushing you down your echo chamber. It's trying to build balance. But, you know, you have to, again, be careful what you wish for. And this is why the framing of the experience is so important, because right now, if, for instance, like Twitter started feeding all of the Democrats, you know, the Republican recs in their sidebar, everyone would probably go crazy and be like, oh, you're elevating the right, or you're elevating the left. And they would still find something to get outraged about, because honestly, no matter what the recommendations are, people are probably going to get pissed, and it's not going to be exactly what they want to see. So you have to change actually your idea of what you want to see. If you can change the context with which, you know, you see a Marxist or an ANCAP, then you're excited about seeing that, you know, brilliant scholar of, you know, the what's the essay that you sent over, repressive
Marcuse.
tolerance. Yeah, Herbert Marcuse, or you know, Marx, or whatever. We should be trying to educate ourselves more on what the other side thinks.
Here, but it's a tall feat that you ask of everyone, because open-mindedness comes with a lot of discomfort, and it's challenging, and it's not as fun as just living in one's echo chamber. But we do know that there is an interest of people, and the more people are taking this on, the more we can pave the way to going back to civil discourse, which is important.
But again, I would ask you this question. I mean, is it utopian? Is it overly utopian to think that feeding someone a person who holds opposite viewpoints to them is going to work? Is that too much to ask? Or do you think that maybe you have both widgets in the sidebar? You have the one that is like what they're likely, you know, who they're likely to like based on their echo chamber, and who they're unlikely to based on their echo chamber. Maybe that would be more of a balanced solution, so you're not sort of forcing people into a recommendation. What do you think?
I mean, I think that would be good to give people the option so that they can at least look at that. But what I'm saying is people have to have the preference for that, because if they're just happy with their Facebook and Twitter feed, which is just like their own party or whatever affiliation they chose, they might not want to see anything else. I mean, there's different preferences regarding that. Some people are more open-minded, some people are not. And we can respect that. And that's the reason why giving them the option in the first place, what you're working on, is so important. But I'm just saying it comes with emotional cost to challenge one's thought, because often like we have all of these strong beliefs and they're somehow fall very squarely within the beliefs of the party, if you talk about the political realm. But often we don't even question those things. And if you see like a little bit questioning at like one argument, then maybe doubt creeps in. And that's hard. I mean, that's an emotional challenge, because our identity is wrapped up very deeply with our beliefs. They might be religious, they might be political, it doesn't matter. So it's a cost for a user to do that, but I do know that more and more people want to do it, and it's great that you provide that option.
I mean, the other level of the conversation, which is, in some senses even more important about the unhealthy qualities of social media, is just social media in general. And, yes, there's like the giving attention to your echo chamber and just being addicted to your newsfeed. But like what places like the Center for Humane Technology are working on is they're trying to lobby Google and Apple and these other places to get you off your phone completely for a certain amount of time. Like a lot of the reason that you see some of these tools like that give you a notification when you've been like watching videos for too long, like YouTube has started to do that. Apple has tools like that so you can track screen time. These types of things actually are really important, which is why we have focused on real life events as well at Minds, and having conversations in the real world where you're not just staring at your phone. And I think that there's potential with the pairing functionality that we're doing to almost have like a Tinder type experience for discourse, and connecting with people who would want to meet up in real life to talk. And that it's a dangerous situation potentially, where again, I mean, are people really going to want to go and meet up with someone who's just on the opposite end of the spectrum as them, or facilitating somebody to go have lunch with a Nazi? Is that on the top of everyone's list of things to do? No, but I think there are certain people who would be interested in that, and you should be able to dive into your preferences and figure out who to connect with. But again, facilitating real life connection really has to be at the center of this, because otherwise, what are we really spending our time doing? You're muted, Jack.
Sorry about that. Also, one of the things we've learned from Daryl and all his work is that it's not even so much about like getting someone to sort of fully agree with you and change their mind and reaching some utopia where everybody believes the same thing. That's just not going to happen. What he talks about is how it's really just about finding commonality somewhere. Like it doesn't have to be on your ultimate belief of politics or anything, but as long as you can start finding common ground in smaller steps, then that's progress. And I think what's happening now is like the polarization has gotten so extreme that people have gotten to the point where they're just like not even willing to talk with someone who disagrees with them. So I don't know how much the goal is even necessarily like saying someone has to convince somebody else that they're completely wrong, but just even shifting people's mindset to be a little more open-minded, that people are allowed to have different opinions than themselves, and that you're able to then find the common ground with the open-mindedness of each other's differences and opinions. That's a huge step forward that we could even take just there.
That's actually all you can ask of people. And I'm glad you brought that up, Jack, because the second you try to change someone's mind is the second that they stop being willing to change their mind. So and Daryl always says this, like all that he does in the beginning phases is to just listen and just be there for them to share what they're thinking. Because really the most evolved people in society are the people who are the best listeners. and are not just trying to get their point across. You know, any family dinner conversation, you know, who's more annoying than the person that's just trying to, you know, win.
And that's also like a lesson that we're instilling in our thousands of volunteers that we're training every year. Like, your goal should be that at the end of the conversation, and that the person says like, hey, I disagree with you still, but I would like to have a beer with you. Like, you could be my friend, independent of like that your ideas might be completely antithetical to mine, because you just want to come across as somebody who's reasonable, who actually does listen to people, and who takes you seriously and doesn't like vilify for your points, because so much has become black and white. And we in Students for Liberty, we are classical liberals, so we have strong viewpoints, but it's always very problematic if we fall into like black and white thinking and thinking we have all of the truth and everything that we do is morally correct and everybody else is evil, because that will not lead to understanding and will not change anyone's mind. So I like that. Let's shift a little bit the conversation, because we focused a lot on civil discourse, which is more needed than ever. But what about the privacy aspect? Because you're focusing on that within the company as well. Is it not too late for that? Because some people that are advocate for a post-privacy society say like, hey, like all corporations, all government has our data anyway. Like, we just give it out. We want to use the technology, and it's all based on that we're giving up our data. What would you say to an argument like that? Is it too late for real privacy, or can we still have a hope in the digital age? And why does it matter?
Yeah, it's the privacy paradox. I mean, transparency and privacy are two core values, but they mean the opposite thing. So it's more giving people the option to have a private experience. It's not necessarily saying that like we only care about privacy, because, you know, plenty of people want to be totally public and transparent about everything they're doing, and they're happy to share their data. You know, they care about open data, and they're happy to build open data sets for humanity to use. And there are a lot of people who care about consent, but are happy to share. There's other people who want to be fully anonymous, and, you know, maybe for reasons in their country, you know, they have to be anonymous. You know, some people are, you know, their lives are on the line for speaking out. So we don't require personal information to use Minds, and our messenger is encrypted. And so we don't even have access to those conversations, so that we can't even, you know, we want to limit our ability to be tempted to compromise people's information, or, you know, if something ever happened that, you know, someone who compromised the system couldn't even get access. That's why end-to-end encryption is really essential. So we sort of have this, all content mostly on Minds is public. There's a few cases like in Messenger where it's private, but we have a clear distinction between public and private information. And yeah, they sort of go hand in hand in an odd way.
Yeah, and in terms of like, you know, where we're at now with the governments and corporations already having a lot of data on everybody, you know, in Minds, like Bill mentioned, you don't have to give us any personal information. So there's, you know, you can have an account on Minds with a totally anonymous name. You never have to give us anything about yourselves, and therefore all the data that's being generated about that user is not tied in any way to a person. And, you know, that is ultimately, it's not going to fix all the data that they've collected on you in the past, but it gives you sort of this option of privacy moving forward, to share opinions. And, you know, we've seen a lot of crazy waves of growth on Minds with other countries that have more repressive governments, like Thailand and Vietnam. You know, just a couple months ago, we had over 250,000 users join from Thailand because Twitter changed their privacy policy to basically agree to hand over any data they had on any Thai citizen. If the government requested it, they didn't even need any reason. So like if somebody was, you know, saying something negative about the government, like you sort of mentioned before, Wolf, then, you know, they were at risk of who knows what if the government got their hands on what they were saying. So we had a ton of users flood to Minds from Thailand, and that's the ultimate reason they wanted to come, was because if the Thai government comes asking us, we want to be in the position where we don't even have the information to give them to reveal who that person is. So it's definitely another interesting conversation with social media, though. There's plenty of them.
Absolutely. And I mean, most people who probably don't care about privacy would start to care if something like that, what you just said, would happen to them. That suddenly their data is abused in that way and they are personally at risk, but then it's too late because you already have given up everything. So it's good to at least think about that. And another point that I was really thinking about listening to you both is also to think about how these corporations like change the experience. Because we joined Facebook and Twitter because we wanted to hear from the folks that we wanted to hear from, like family, friends, or whatever, like especially Facebook, and then like other reasons for Twitter. But if they don't let us see that stuff, but we are just focusing, or Facebook is just focusing on the stuff that gets us to belong on the platform instead of the stuff that we actually want to see, that is highly, highly problematic. And I'm glad that you are tackling that. But since you have many, many competitors, what would you say is, in terms of privacy or these sorts of abuses, the worst one out there? And can you tell us a couple of horror stories so that we become like a little bit more careful about how we're using social media?
Yeah. Well, I mean, there's the whole Prism program with the NSA that Edward Snowden leaked, which was basically a revolving door between the NSA and many of the major social networks, where they basically had like direct access to the data, and we're using that for all kinds of reasons. And I mean, most people, it's almost like an old saying now, I have nothing to hide, so I don't care. But again, you don't know what you don't know. So to say you don't care is sort of acting like you can predict all future scenarios of what could happen if, your private messages got published on, the front page of the New York Times. So people say they have nothing to hide, but yet why don't they publish all of their private messages to the world? I'm quite confident that they have something to hide in all of their private messages, that they, and they don't want that compromised. So, it's sort of something that people say who just don't really want to have the argument and haven't really thought about the argument. So, but I mean, in terms of more repressive countries, I mean, imprisonment can happen. So, there are even cases of people going to jail, I think in Europe and the UK for problematic posts on social media. There's, people getting fired from their jobs. I mean, that seems to be happening all the time. So now privacy, if you're posting things publicly, then, that's not really going to be much of a different situation on Minds or Facebook or Twitter or anything. And I don't think that you should obviously have to be worried about that. And employers who are firing people based on political opinions online are probably, not the ideal employers.
Very true. So we're nearing the end of this conversation. Of course, people should check out your platform, which is minds.com. But we touched on a bunch of very interesting subjects, from civil discourse to how to change one's mind to privacy. Are there any other resources that you would like to share with our audience that they should check out?
I would just say, have a litmus test for the apps that you engage with. And, not to say don't use anything that is mainstream or anything like that, but there are many alternatives that are popping up that sort of claim to be for free speech and claim to be for privacy. And they like to use this kind of marketing language, but none of their code is open source. So no one can verify it, which we would say is like the number one essential quality of a real alternative social media network. And in terms of privacy, it's just there's huge degrees of the spectrum of speech and privacy. And so you should just really understand if the platform truly represents these principles or if they're just sort of using it as marketing language. And because over the next 5 years, we're going to see many, many alternatives pop up, and there's going to be dozens of them. And you just need to dig a little bit deeper than just reading like the banner on their homepage.
Jack, any other resources you like to share with the audience?
No, I just encourage thank you for everyone who tuned in, and we hope everyone will sign up on Minds and check it out. I'm on there, minds.com/Jack. Bill's on there, minds.com/Ottman. So, subscribe to us and hope to see some of you on there. And yeah, we're just really excited to have the chance to speak with you all. And
did we set up the Students for Liberty page yet?
I set up a test page. I'm talking with them about it too, but
okay, coming soon. Yeah.
Yeah. But yeah, we just encourage you guys all to join, and thanks a lot for listening.
I mean, thank you for doing this great work and really giving people a different alternative to the existing social media, because it's really necessary, and it's good to question like what it does to us and what it potentially could do to us. So having somebody that we can trust, like Bill and Jack Ottman, that certainly is a great alternative. So I applaud your efforts, keep up the great work, and I'm looking forward to continue working with you.
Well, hopefully we'll build the system so you don't have to trust us. You just have to trust yourself. That's the ultimate goal.
Even better. I love that answer. All right. Thanks everyone for listening. If you want to learn more about minds.com, go to that website. And if you want to learn more about Students for Liberty, go to our website. And with that being said, I hope you all have a great day, and thank you very much. Bye-bye.